The first comment about my dress came while the string quartet was still warming up. It was early evening at the Parkfield Grand Hotel. Waiters were moving quietly between tables, setting down glasses that caught the light from the chandeliers. The room smelled faintly of citrus polish and fresh flowers. A wedding always has that feeling before the ceremony begins: soft music, careful smiles, everyone pretending everything is perfectly organized. I was standing near the window adjusting the cuff of my sleeve when my stepsister Lauren walked over. She stopped a few feet away and looked me up and down. Then she laughed. "Emily, where did you even get that dress?" Her voice carried farther than she probably intended. A few people turned their heads. I smoothed the fabric at my waist and didn't answer. Lauren circled me slowly, the way people do when they're inspecting something they've already decided they don't like. "It's supposed to be Valentino, right?" she said. "Or is it one of those online knockoffs?" Her brother Jake was already holding up his phone. Recording. They had been doing that for years. Small clips for their private group chat. Moments they thought were funny. Moments where I didn't belong. The fabric of my dress brushed softly against the marble floor as I shifted my weight. "Honestly," Lauren continued, touching the sleeve lightly, "from far away it almost works. But up close, the stitching is uneven." "It is," Jake said from behind the phone. "Look right here." He zoomed in. My other stepsister, Claire, leaned closer. "And that color," she added thoughtfully. "Designers don't use that shade anymore." I took a small sip of champagne. The bubbles stung slightly on my tongue. 3 years. That was how long it had been since my mother married their father. 3 years of comments that always sounded casual. Always sounded like jokes. My fashion degree was cute. My internships were playing dress up. Anytime I mentioned work, someone would laugh and change the subject. Across the room, my mother sat at a table near the aisle. She glanced over when she heard Lauren's voice. Then she looked down again. "Relax," Lauren said lightly. "We're just curious." Jake lowered the phone slightly. "So, what did you pay for it?" he asked. He tilted his head as if doing the math in advance. $70? $100, Claire suggested. "Come on," Lauren said. "Tell us." I placed the glass back on the tray of a passing waiter. The ballroom lights reflected across the deep blue fabric of the dress. They were right about one thing. I couldn't afford a real designer dress. Not with my student loans and the small apartment I shared with 2 other interns. Which was why I had spent 6 months making this one. Late nights in a quiet studio. Learning how beadwork shifts when someone breathes. Learning how certain dyes look different under warm light. Learning how to take an idea and slowly turn it into something real. Lauren smiled patiently. "Well," I was about to answer when a calm voice spoke from behind us. "I'm glad someone noticed the stitching." The room became very quiet. I recognized that voice immediately, but Lauren didn't. She turned slowly, and the moment she saw the man standing behind her, the champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. For a moment, no one said anything. Then the man beside me adjusted the cuff of his jacket and said calmly, "Yes, I designed it." I kept my eyes on the broken glass and waited. No one spoke for a few seconds after the glass broke. The string quartet continued playing in the corner, unaware that half the ballroom had quietly stopped listening. Lauren stared at the man behind her as if she were trying to solve a puzzle that refused to make sense. I'm sorry," she said finally. "Do I know you?" The man standing beside me gave a small, patient smile. He was older, maybe in his late 60s. Silver hair, perfectly combed. His tuxedo fit the way expensive tailoring always does, nothing dramatic, just precise. "I'm Adrian Marchetti," he said. The name moved through the room almost like a shift in temperature. Jake lowered his phone. Someone at a nearby table whispered something that sounded like, "That's him." Lauren blinked twice. Adrian Marchetti had been designing couture for nearly 4 decades. Most people didn't recognize him immediately, but once the name registered, the reaction was usually the same: surprise first, then quick politeness. Lauren's voice became noticeably softer. "Oh, I didn't realize." He glanced at the dress again. "The stitching you mentioned," he said calmly, "is meant to look uneven." Lauren swallowed. "I see. It's intentional," he continued. The pattern follows a constellation structure. It's meant to appear irregular until you step back. Jake slowly lowered the phone all the way. Adrian then turned slightly toward me. Emily helped design the beadwork, he said. That was the moment when a silence in the room became heavier. Lauren looked at me, then back at him, then back at me again. Wait, she said carefully. You mean, she works with you? I could feel several people nearby pretending not to listen. Adrian accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server. She interned with my studio last year, he said, and she's been assisting on several projects since then. Lauren's expression tightened slightly, but she told us she was interning. Yes, Jake cleared his throat. So, you're saying she helped design that dress? Adrian took a small sip of champagne. About 30% of it, he said. The beadwork pattern was entirely her idea. Across the ballroom, my mother had finally stood up. She was watching us now, uncertain whether she should come closer. Lauren's confidence had quietly drained away, but we thought she didn't finish the sentence. I folded my hands loosely in front of me. You thought I was exaggerating, I said. No anger, just a simple statement. Jake looked down at the floor. Claire suddenly seemed very interested in adjusting her bracelet. Adrian glanced around the room with mild curiosity. I'm always surprised when families don't talk about these things, he said. Emily mentioned a few exhibitions she worked on. A show in Milan last fall, I believe. Lauren's head snapped up. Milan? I nodded slightly. I tried to tell you about that, I said. She stared at me. You said you were traveling for work, she said slowly. Yes. You never said it was. Milan. I thought about that for a moment. I did, I said. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Jake rubbed the back of his neck. Adrian set his empty glass on a passing tray. Well, he said lightly, Fashion Week tends to sound imaginary if you've never seen it. A wedding coordinator hurried across the room toward us, suddenly very attentive. Mr. Marchetti, she said breathlessly, your table is ready. He nodded politely. Then he looked back at me. Emily, he said, offering his arm, shall we? As we began walking toward the front tables, I could hear Jake whisper behind us. Did he say Milan? Lauren answered quietly. I think he did. I didn't look back, but I knew they were all watching. By the time we reached the front of the ballroom, our seating arrangement had changed. An hour earlier, my name had been placed at a side table near the service doors, close enough to hear dishes being stacked in the prep area. Now a coordinator in a black suit was pulling out a chair for me at one of the center tables, only a few feet from the bride and groom. I noticed that before I sat down. I also noticed who had been moved away. Lauren and Claire had been placed 2 tables back. Not far enough to leave, just far enough to watch. Adrian sat beside me and unfolded his napkin with the same calm care he seemed to apply to everything else. He never looked rushed. That was one of the first things I had learned from him in the studio. People mistake noise for importance. Real authority is usually quieter than that. Dinner service began. Silver lids lifted. Glasses were refreshed. The quartet shifted into something softer. At our table, conversation started cautiously. The bride tried to recover first. Emily, she said, smiling a little too carefully, I had no idea you were working with Mr. Marchetti. That's incredible. I looked at her. I remembered her engagement party 6 months earlier. I had mentioned a studio review I was preparing for, and she had laughed lightly and asked whether I was still doing the fashion thing. Yes, I said. I've been there for a while. Adrian cut into his dinner and spoke without looking up. She stayed late more than anyone else in a studio last summer. The bride gave a small nod. That's very impressive. He continued in that same even tone. We noticed her because she doesn't talk much when she works. She observes first. Then she solves the problem. I kept my eyes on my plate. At the other end of the table, the groom asked Adrian how they had met. He set down his fork. She came in through a scholarship program, he said. Most interns arrive trying to impress people. Emily arrived with a notebook. That made a few people smile politely. Adrian turned to me. You still have the first one? I nodded. In my apartment. The navy one? Yes. He smiled. Good. There was something grounding about the way he spoke. He never performed for a room. He simply answered the question in front of him. That had a way of changing the room anyway. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated once against my lap. I looked down. A message from Nora, Adrian's assistant. Car is set for 10:15. Also, he's enjoying himself more than he'll admit. I put the phone face down. Then I looked across the room. Jake was no longer filming. His phone was on the table. Lauren, though, was speaking very quickly to Claire, both of them glancing in my direction, and then away again. That was familiar, too. When they thought I had nothing, they were loud. When they realized I might have something they wanted, they got quieter. Adrian noticed where I was looking. Bill approached before dessert, he said. I turned slightly toward him. You seem very sure. He reached for his water glass. People are predictable around access. That word settled in my mind. Access. To rooms. To jobs. To names. To circles they had always assumed belonged to them. The first time I understood that clearly was during my internship. Not talent alone. Not effort alone. Access mattered. And people who had always lived near it often confused proximity with merit. I sat back in my chair and let the sounds of the room settle around me. Cutlery. Glasses. Quiet laughter from the neighboring table. The faint scent of rosemary and butter rising from the plates. Then I started thinking the way I usually did when a situation shifted. Not emotionally. Structurally. Step 1. Say very little. Step 2. Let people show what they believe is happening. Step 3. Respond only to facts. It was an old habit. One I had built during school, then at the studio, then in every room where someone assumed being quiet meant being uncertain. Across the ballroom, my mother finally came over. She stopped beside my chair and rested her fingers lightly on the back of it. Emily, she said, I didn't realize tonight would be like this. I looked up at her. Her voice wasn't cruel. It was thinner than that. Careful. Regretful in a way that arrived late enough to be convenient. It's a wedding, I said. Things happen. She glanced at Adrian, then back to me. You never really explained how serious your work had become. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I reached for my water glass. I did, I said. A few times. She pressed her lips together. I could tell she was trying to remember whether that was true. It was. Portfolio reviews. Travel dates. Sample deadlines. The studio show in Milan. The buying meeting in New York. Each time I had tried, someone had interrupted, laughed, corrected, or redirected the conversation. And each time she had let it happen because stopping it would have made dinner uncomfortable. I suppose, she said quietly, I should have asked more. Yes, I said. She nodded once. No argument. No defense. Then she stepped away. Adrian waited until she had gone before speaking again. Dessert, he said softly. I almost smiled. Right on time. And a moment later, Lauren stood from her table, picked up her glass, and started walking toward us. Lauren arrived with the kind of smile people wear when they are trying to cross a bridge they burned an hour earlier. She stopped beside our table and leaned slightly toward me, careful now, almost gentle. Emily, she said, can I steal you for a second? Adrian continued cutting into his dessert. You may ask, he said. Lauren gave a quick laugh that didn't land anywhere. It's nothing serious, she said. Just family. I looked at her for a moment, then set my napkin beside my plate and stood. We stepped a short distance away, near a column wrapped in white flowers and soft light. Far enough to speak privately. Not far enough to disappear. Jake joined us a few seconds later. Claire followed after that. No one apologized immediately. That told me a lot. Lauren folded her arms, then unfolded them. We didn't know, she said. I waited. Jake glanced toward the head table, then back at me. If we'd known you were actually working with someone like Adrian Marchetti, obviously we wouldn't have said any of that. There it was. Not regret. Calibration. I kept my voice even. That's the part you think matters? Claire looked uncomfortable. That's not what he means. It is, I said. No one answered. I could hear the muted clink of glasses behind us and the low sound of conversation filling back into the room now that the first shock had passed. Lauren lowered her voice. Look, maybe we were unfair sometimes. Sometimes. She exhaled. Fine. More than sometimes. But you have to understand how it sounded. You'd mentioned Paris, Milan, buyers, studio reviews. It didn't sound real. I looked at her. It sounded real enough to me. I was there. Jake rubbed his jaw. You could have shown us something. I almost asked what, exactly, they thought work looked like. A badge. A headline. A printed invitation with gold lettering. Instead, I said I did. Lauren frowned. When? I answered in order. At Thanksgiving, I showed you the invitation to the student showcase. You said the paper looked cheap. She said nothing. At Christmas, I told you I was flying to New York for a buying review. Jake asked if I meant folding sweaters in a department store. Jake looked away. In February, I mentioned the atelier was considering one of my sketches for development. Claire asked whether that meant tracing something from Pinterest. Claire's face went red. I kept my hands loosely folded in front of me. No raised voice. No rush. Just sequence. Step 1, date. Step 2, statement. Step 3, their response. People have a hard time arguing with a clean timeline. Lauren tried again. Okay, maybe we were dismissive. You were. But this doesn't need to become a whole thing. I noticed that phrase. A whole thing. As if the problem were not what they had done, but the fact that it was now visible. I nodded once. You're right, I said. It doesn't. For a moment, she looked relieved. Then I continued. That's why I'm not making it one. Jake blinked. What does that mean? It means I'm not raising my voice. I'm not embarrassing you. I'm not walking table to table explaining your behavior. I'm simply remembering it accurately. That landed. Claire was the first to speak in a more honest tone. We were awful to you. I turned to her. Yes. Her eyes dropped. I know. Lauren's posture changed then. The edge came back, just a little. So what? You're never going to talk to us again because of one bad night? I looked at her calmly. This wasn't one bad night. She went quiet. The flowers along the columns smelled faintly sweet, almost powdery. Somewhere near the dance floor, someone laughed too loudly, then caught themselves. I let the pause sit there. Then I said, this was 3 years of comments, jokes, recordings, interruptions, and corrections about things you never bothered to understand. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. I continued before anyone could reshape it. You don't get to reduce a pattern into a misunderstanding just because a well-known man confirmed what I already told you. Lauren's face tightened. We're trying here. No, I said. You're adjusting. Again, silence. That was when Jake in this version, realized what he actually wanted. He lowered his voice further. Can Adrian help people get into shows? Or interviews? Stuff like that. There it was. Clear now. Access. Not apology. Not repair. Our route. I looked at him for a few seconds, then answered plainly. I wouldn't know. You work with him. Yes. He frowned. So you could ask. I could, I said. I won't. Lauren stared at me. That's kind of harsh. No, I said. It's a boundary. None of them spoke after that. I could see, almost physically, the point where they understood the structure had changed. Not emotionally. Practically. Their version of me, the quiet extra person at family events, the one whose life could be narrated for her, no longer fit the facts in front of them. And I had no intention of helping them rebuild it into something more flattering. My phone vibrated once more. I glanced down. A message from Nora. 10 minutes. Side entrance is clear. I put the phone face down. Then I looked at the 3 of them and said, I should get back to my table. Lauren moved aside first. No one tried to stop me. When I returned, Adrian looked up from his coffee and asked, very quietly, how did it go? I sat down and lifted my glass. Efficiently, I said. He nodded once. Then I noticed the bride standing near the head table, watching me as if she had finally realized she might need a conversation of her own. The bride approached just as the coffee service began. Her name was Rebecca, and until that evening I had only known her in the careful, surface-level way people know a friend of the family. Smiles at holiday dinners. Brief comments at engagement parties. The kind of familiarity that sounds warmer than it is. She stopped beside the table and gave Adrian a polite nod. Mr. Marchetti. He inclined his head. Then she looked at me. Emily, do you have a minute? I could tell from her expression that this was not about friendliness. It was about management. The room had shifted around her, and she wanted to understand how much of that shift could still be controlled. I stood. We walked a short distance toward the edge of the ballroom, near the hallway that led to the restrooms and the coat check. It was quieter there. Carpet underfoot instead of marble. The music sounded softer from that distance, a little muffled. Rebecca clasped her hands in front of her. I wanted to say, she began, I'm sorry if anything tonight made you uncomfortable. I waited. People often reveal the truth in a second sentence, not the first. She took a breath. I just think maybe everything got a little out of proportion. There it was. I looked at the framed mirror on the wall behind her, then back at her. What part felt out of proportion? She blinked. The seam, she said. Lauren can be thoughtless, but she didn't know. None of us did. I kept my voice level. You're saying the problem was lack of information. Well, yes. No, I said. The problem was confidence. She frowned slightly. I don't understand. I did not sit. I did not lean against the wall. I just stood there and answered her as plainly as I could. They were comfortable speaking that way because they were certain there would be no cost to it, not because they were missing facts. Rebecca folded her arms, then quickly lowered them again when she realized how defensive it looked. I think that's a little unfair. Is it? She hesitated. I continued. At your engagement party, I told you I was finishing a design review. You laughed and told me I was very committed to the fantasy. Her face changed. Only slightly, but enough. I don't remember saying it like that. I do. The hallway stayed quiet around us. Somewhere behind the doors, dishes were being cleared. I could smell coffee and linen spray. Rebecca looked toward the ballroom, then back at me. Emily, tonight is my wedding. I'm trying to keep things calm. So am I. That stopped her for a moment. I let the silence sit there. Then I said, I haven't raised my voice once. She looked at me carefully after that, maybe hearing the difference between calm and passive for the first time. I'm not asking you to apologize to them, she said. I just don't want this turning into something people talk about tomorrow. I almost smiled. That decision may be late. Her eyes flicked toward the ballroom again. Jake's video, I assumed. Maybe other phones too. A room like that never stays private once something unusual happens in it. Rebecca exhaled slowly. I didn't realize Adrian Marchetti would be here. No, I said. You didn't. She studied my face, then asked the question she had been circling the whole time. Are you actually joining his studio? Yes. As a designer? Yes. The second yes landed differently. It removed the last place where she might have told herself this was temporary, inflated, or social. She nodded once, processing. Then, softer now, why didn't you ever say more? I answered her the same way I had answered everyone else. I did. She looked down. That was the first honest moment of the conversation. Not dramatic. Not tearful. Just recognition arriving later than it should have. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. I think I saw you the way everyone else did. Yes, I said. And I didn't question it. No, she pressed her lips together and gave a small nod, like she was signing off on something she didn't like but could no longer dispute. I am sorry, she said then, and this time it sounded less arranged. I believed she meant it, at least partly. But belief and repair are different things. Thank you, I said. I didn't offer anything more. No comfort. No opening. No invitation to keep going until she felt better. She seemed to understand that. Before we walked back, she asked one final question. Is there anything I should say to Lauren? I thought about it for a second. Then I answered in the clearest way I could. You don't need to say anything for me. Just be accurate if she retells it. Rebecca gave one short nod. That was the end of it. When we re-entered the ballroom, the energy had changed again. Not louder. More careful. People glanced over and then away. A few smiled at me in the new, polished way people do once they have updated your place in the room. I noticed that too. It wasn't flattering. It was educational. Adrian was still at the table, one hand resting near his untouched coffee, as if he had known exactly how long the conversation would take. When I sat down, he looked at me once and asked, settled. Yes, I said. He slid a folded card across the table toward me. No explanation. I opened it under the tablecloth line where no one else could see. It was a printed event credential. Marchetti Atelier, Spring Gala, principal guest, and beneath that, in Adrian's handwriting, Monday, 9 a.m. bring the portfolio. We'll do this properly. I read it once. Then I folded it again and placed it carefully in my clutch. Across the room, Lauren was watching me. And this time, she looked worried. I left the wedding a little after 10 o'clock. Adrian and I used the side entrance near the service hallway, just as Nora had arranged. Outside, the night air was cool and carried the faint smell of rain on pavement. Valets were moving quietly under the hotel awning. Somewhere across the street, a car door closed, then everything went still again. Before I got into the car, my phone started vibrating almost continuously. I looked at the screen. Lauren, Jake, Claire, my mother, then 2 numbers I didn't recognize. I put the phone on silent and sat back against the leather seat. The city lights moved in long reflections across the window as we pulled away. Adrian didn't say much on the drive, which I appreciated. He had a way of letting a person come back to themselves without filling the silence. About halfway to my apartment, he said, "Tomorrow will be noisy." I know. By Monday, it will sort itself into categories. I turned slightly toward him. He counted them off on one hand. People who are embarrassed. A second finger. People who are opportunistic. A third. And the small number of people who were paying attention all along. I nodded. That sounded right. When he dropped me off, he waited until I had my keys in hand before the car pulled away. Inside, my apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning. A ceramic mug in the sink. A sketch roll on the chair by the table. My black portfolio case leaning against the wall near the bookshelf. Quiet. I slipped off my shoes and stood in the kitchen for a moment with both hands resting on the counter. Then I started doing what I always do when something complicated ends. I put things in order. Clutch on the table. Dress bag unzipped and laid flat. Jewelry into the small dish by the lamp. Event card removed and placed inside the front pocket of my portfolio. Then I washed my face, changed into a sweatshirt, and made tea. Only after that did I turn my phone back over. There were 23 messages. I opened them in the only order that made sense. First, family. Lauren had sent 6. The first was short. I think things got misunderstood tonight. The second came 3 minutes later. I was trying to be funny, not cruel. Then, can we talk tomorrow? Then, I didn't know he was your boss. Not my boss, I thought. That assumption again. Every relationship understood only through hierarchy. The 5th message was different. If there's any chance you could introduce me to someone at Bergman's or Marchetti, I'd really appreciate it. There it was. Access. Again. Jake's messages were less polished. Can you tell people not to post that video? Then, Lauren's really upset. Then, also if Adrian saw my recording, can you let me know if that's a problem? That one I read twice. Not because it surprised me, because it clarified the entire evening in one sentence. He wasn't worried about what he had done. He was worried it might follow him. Claire's message was the simplest. I'm sorry. I should have stopped it before tonight. I didn't. I believed that one more than the others. Then I opened my mother's. It was longer. She said she wished she had done more. That she had not understood how serious my work had become. That she saw now how often she had allowed things to pass because confronting them would have made family events harder. That part, at least, was honest. At the bottom she wrote, "I hope this is not the way you remember all of us." I sat with that for a while. Then I typed back the only answer that felt accurate. It's not the only way, but it is part of it. I didn't send anything to Lauren or Jake. To Claire, I replied, "Thank you for saying it clearly." Then I put the phone face down. The next morning, the video was already moving. Not everywhere. Not nationally. Nothing dramatic like that. But in the circles that mattered to them, it was enough. A few wedding guests had posted short clips. Someone had tagged Adrian. One fashion account reposted the moment where he identified the dress and mentioned the beadwork. By noon, a local style blog had written a small item about the unknown young designer at the Parkfield wedding. By 2 o'clock, Nora had forwarded me 3 emails. The first was from a boutique showroom asking whether I was represented independently. The second was from a stylist requesting a portfolio link. The third was from a recruiter at Bergman's, the same store Lauren had dreamed about for years, asking whether I would be willing to schedule a conversation after the gala. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I opened my notebook. Then I made a clean list. Step 1. Confirm Monday with Adrian. Step 2. Update digital portfolio. Step 3. Respond only to direct professional inquiries. Step 4. Do not engage with family while the story is still moving. That last one mattered. Not because I was angry. Because clarity is easier to keep when other people are still trying to rearrange it. By late afternoon, Lauren sent one more message. People are twisting what happened. You know I didn't mean it that way. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I replied, no one is twisting it. They're repeating it. After that, she stopped messaging. Monday morning came exactly the way real turning points usually do. No music. No dramatic weather. Just an alarm at 6:15, we glide through the blinds, and the sound of the kettle beginning to hum in my kitchen. At 8:40, I walked into the atelier carrying my portfolio. The front room smelled like fabric steam, paper, and fresh coffee. Assistants were already moving between tables with garment bags and sketch packets. A rack of unfinished pieces stood near the windows, each one covered in muslin. Nora met me near the front desk and smiled like someone who had expected this outcome several days earlier. He's in the review room, she said. And yes, the whole wedding story reached the office before you did. I assumed so. She handed me a printed packet. My name was on the front. Not intern. Not assistant. Junior designer, offer term salary. Project scope. Travel expectations. Review structure. Health coverage. Everything documented. Everything clear. That mattered to me more than any compliment anyone had offered all weekend. Inside the review room, Adrian stood near the long table with my portfolio already open to the blue gown sketches. He looked up as I entered. Good, he said. You're on time. I set my bag down. He tapped the first page. We'll go through everything properly, he said. And before noon, HR will finalize the paperwork. No speeches. No sentimental congratulations. Just structure. Terms. Next steps. The truth, when it finally settled, looked like that. Not a dramatic apology. Not a grand public reversal. A contract. A title. A start date. And by the end of that week, every person at that wedding knew exactly what had happened. Not the version they preferred. The real one. A week later, the dress was hanging by my apartment window. Morning light was coming through the glass in a pale, steady strip, catching the beadwork one section at a time. From a distance, it looked almost simple. Up close, the pattern shifted. Tiny lines. Small corrections. Hours of work hidden inside something people thought they understood in 10 seconds. I stood there with a cup of tea in both hands and looked at it for a while. The apartment was quiet except for the soft rattle of the radiator and the sound of a bus stopping outside at the corner. My sketch papers were stacked neatly on the table. My new access card to the atelier sat beside my keys. The offer packet was filed in a blue folder in the top drawer, signed and dated. Everything had a place. That helped. The week itself had been busy in a useful way. Measurements. Review meetings. Fabric sourcing. A long afternoon with Nora going over calendars, fittings, and shipping schedules for the gala pieces. Real work. Clear work. The kind that leaves you tired in the evening, but not unsettled. My family had mostly gone quiet. Claire sent one more message on Tuesday. Short. Respectful. She said she meant what she wrote and that she did not expect anything from me. I answered her the same day and told her I appreciated that. My mother called twice. I let both calls go to voicemail before listening later. Her messages were gentler now, less defensive. She sounded like someone trying, maybe for the first time, to describe the truth without arranging it to sound better. I had not decided yet what I wanted to do with that. Some things do not need an immediate answer. Lauren did not contact me again after my last text. Jake sent one more message asking whether the video would die down soon. I did not respond. That, too, was an answer. On Thursday evening, after work, I stopped by a small stationery shop 3 blocks from my apartment and bought a proper document box for my sketches. On Friday, I replaced the weak lamp over my work table with one that showed color more accurately. Saturday morning, I cleaned the kitchen, watered the plant by the sink, and mended the inside seam of an old coat I still liked too much to throw away. It was an ordinary morning. I think that was the part one valued most. Not the wedding. Not the silence that followed when people realized they had been wrong. Not even the contract. Just the return to ordinary life with the facts finally in the right order. The dress was never really the point. Neither was Adrian walking into that ballroom at exactly the right moment. The point was simpler than that. Some people had decided who I was long before they had enough information to know. They treated their assumption like evidence. Then, when the evidence arrived, they wanted credit for adjusting quickly. I don't think that counts for much. What counts is who listens the first time. Who asks? Who notices? Who does not need a famous name in a tuxedo to confirm that another person's life is real? Monday afternoon, while I was organizing trim samples in the atelier library, Nora set a folder down beside me. "What's this?" I asked. She leaned against the table. "A referral request." I looked up. "Already?" She smiled. "It's not what you think." Inside the folder was a note from one of the scholarship coordinators Adrian worked with. A student from Baltimore. Good technical skill. Strong portfolio. No industry connections. The note said she had almost turned down an interview because someone in her family kept telling her fashion was not a real profession and that she was embarrassing herself. I read that line twice. Then I closed the folder. Nora watched my face carefully. "You don't have to take her on," she said. "You've only just started." I rested my hand on the folder for a moment. Then I said, "No, I'd like to meet her." Because sometimes the next thing arrives quietly, not as a grand lesson, just as another person standing near the same kind of doorway, trying to decide whether to walk through it. So that was the week everything changed and then settled. I got the job. I kept the dress. I stopped confusing silence with permission. And I learned that when people finally show you they were only respectful once respect became useful, it is perfectly reasonable to step back and let distance do its work. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. I'm really glad you were here. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy calm, real stories like this one, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. 2 more popular stories will be on your screen next, and I think you'll want to hear those too.